Cary Harrison with you, and you may not realize this, but veterans who go and give their lives, and certainly the many that are out right now during these geopolitical tensions, may return and not get all the medicine they can eat from the VA. But wait a minute. I thought the VA gave all the free medicine that veterans deserved and were entitled to. Well, it's not the case. And if they have a headache or a broken arm that was not related to service, they have to go to a hospital like you and me, and they have enormous medical debt. A shock to many, but a cure perhaps to many more, thanks to a man named Jerry Ashton, who's already gotten rid of $7 billion in regular people's medical debt and is now aiming to help our own veterans. Jerry Ashton, I want to welcome you so much.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on your program. And this is a situation that needs more awareness. Nobody, at least I, even as a Navy veteran, I hadn't realized that I was subject to medical debt, provided that I didn't have a service-related illness or problem that caused that medical visit to a emergency ward or what have you. Everybody hears the stories about homeless veterans and veterans itself, and everybody wants to help veterans and veteran suicides. These shouldn't be happening to begin with. But very few people understand that veterans, on top of everything else that they encounter in this world, that they will be burdened by unpaid and unpayable medical debt, thanks to a broken system, a broken approach to the way that we treat the people who have put their lives on the line for you and me.
You know, you say that, Jerry Ashton, and I think about how NATO is said to never have been stronger than it is today. We have military in active service in huge numbers right now, vast numbers, with an expectation that if they get injured or when they return down the road, they get sick again, that they will be treated automatically. And we learned that it's not the case because of a broken system. So you have a system, an inverted or an adjacent system, we might say, to the system you used to get rid of over $7 billion in regular people's medical debt. And now you're focusing on the VA itself and veterans' medical debt.
That's right. What you're alluding to or referring to is RIP Medical Debt. That's a charity that I co-founded in 2014, whose mission when we started out was to take donations, take donations, go to the medical debt market, purchase medical debt for pennies on the dollar, and then once it was in our possession, we would slit its throat. We would forgive it legitimately with no tax consequences to the recipient. And while we were doing that, I kind of noticed that there were veterans that were being caught up in this medical debt forgiveness. And I said, how does that happen? So my partner and I, Craig Antico, went down to Washington, D.C., and we met with a subcommittee on veterans' health, where we were told, and this was a few years ago, that there was over $6 billion worth of unpaid medical debt incurred at emergency wards and other forms of care that was given by the general public to a veteran, but which was not reimbursed, not paid back to that hospital. You can imagine how that makes a hospital unhappy, but it certainly doesn't help the veteran, who then becomes a collection object for our healthcare system.
And these veterans, admittedly, are not in good shape to begin with. A full quarter of the homeless people in Los Angeles, of which there are 140,000, a full quarter are guys that have come back from Afghanistan, from Iraq, with head injuries and missing limbs. They're not in good shape to begin with. They often can't get jobs, and so throwing medical debt on top. You mentioned something interesting, Jerry Ashton. You said without tax consequences. And people can't even relate. What does that mean? That they get their medical debt forgiven without tax consequences. So there's a special bonus that you throw in here.
Well, in RIP Medical Debt, because, and that's ripmedicaldebt.com if you'd like to look at my background and what we've done there. RIP Medical Debt is a 501c3 charity. And since a charity can forgive things, as a charity, it's a charitable act and therefore not taxable. That's the difference.
And you also remove people's negative credit mark, which means they could actually maybe go get a job because they don't have a negative credit mark. They could rent a car, they could get an apartment, things that might have been impossible before. So it has kind of a double dip meaning. And let's point out here, this is not an ask for money. This conversation we're having, this exposure, the spotlight on what you're doing to end medical debt.
It's End Vet Med Debt, and the organization, my organization that is causing this awareness campaign. It's not a money-raising campaign, it's an awareness-raising campaign. And in California and in Florida, two of the major states that have veterans, and in those states, California, for example, there are 18 million veterans in our country. 1.8 million of those are in California. 1.4 in Florida, 1.4 in Texas. Now, when you have a congregation of people who are veterans and they're getting older and they're like anybody else, they're going to need medical attention, whether it be an accident or an illness. The surprise for them, of course, is that if they have any reason to visit an emergency ward or something other than I would say, an accident or an illness that came about because of the military service, they're on the hook for that bill. There is no insurance for that veteran to be able to go back to the VA and say, please help me. Now, things are changing in that, but not changing fast enough. So if you go to endvetmeddebt.com or endveteranmedicaldebt.com, there's a
Petition.
Yeah, a petition. We have a petition that says to the VA, we want you very strongly to consider giving up all the medical debt that you have on your books that is unpaid and unpayable and make it available for forgiveness. It's not asking a lot. You can't collect on it anyway. Make that available for a charity like RIP Medical Debt to step in and forgive it totally. Now, the present VA program, by the way, that was announced with great fanfare, said we're going to forgive veteran debt. Well, not exactly. So, it's always the left hand giveth and the right hand taketh away. And what it really means is that if you're a veteran and you have unpayable medical debt, basically you have to petition for that. You have to request that. It's not given to you automatically. In our case, it would be given automatically because if you're 2 times the poverty level or you're putting out, say, 5% of your annual income for medical debt, you need to have help. And that help is the best in the form of forgiveness. So when you go to that website, there is a button that says, sign this petition. And that petition is going to go to the VA and get them awakened to the fact that a lot of people are getting upset about how our veterans are being treated. Now, early on, when I was starting RIP Medical Debt, we wrote a book called End Medical Debt. And quite recently, last year, we brought out the COVID edition. And in that, there's a chapter 5, and the chapter 5 says, the title, No Thank You for Your Service. And it illustrates within that chapter the several people that we focus on who absolutely were abused by the VA system. Not because the VA system is so bad, it's just that it's encumbered by congressional oversight, it's encumbered by a budget that doesn't meet the needs of the veterans. Now, if you go to that website, endvetmeddebt.com, you click on that donate button, you will get a download free copy of that chapter. So you can, as a citizen, as a concerned citizen, you can see for yourself, read for yourself what the problems are.
So just to summarize, what you're doing, Jerry Ashton, is this more or less the same as what you did with RIP Medical Debt, where you successfully relieved $7 billion in regular people's medical debt, coast to coast, and remove their negative credit mark, which was impeding their chance to rent cars, fly on airplanes, get apartments, whatever they needed to do. So it restores them back to a level playing field. Now we have vets. You're going to the VA, you're going to the federal government and saying, look, there's all this debt that they can never collect on anyway. Your charity will buy that debt, pay it off, and clear the records of all these vets so they're on neutral territory once again and can actually heal and go forward, which is something I think we want for everyone. Certainly, if you have parents, they're probably vets, grandparents, 100%, and friends and relatives. And given today's geopolitical climate, you definitely know people that are involved. So this is a great campaign. And just to reset, you're not asking for money. All you're asking for is signatures. So enough people say something, the government ends up listening.
That they do, and I'm looking forward to them having all ears for this campaign.